Selling a home in 2026 is completely different than 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Agent commissions have shifted, the way buyers find the home they're looking for has transformed, and even the rules around when buyers are allowed to look at homes have completely changed. So, in this video, I'm going to give you the exact blueprint you need if you're trying to sell your home yourself or properly vet to find the right realtor for the job. So, I'm going to cover the entire home buying process from the ground up. Understanding this layout is the foundation for marketing your property, evaluating offers that come in, managing the deadlines, and ensuring that it's a smooth transaction. So, to simplify, the process really breaks down into three main steps. Step one is the initial contract negotiation and acceptance. This is where the buyer makes an offer and you, as the seller, will accept it. Your contract should outline a couple big pieces like the purchase price, the due diligence deadline, financing and appraisal deadline, and the final settlement deadline. Crucially, the contract also details exactly how the agents involved will be compensated, who covers the specific closing costs, and how disputes in the contract are handled. Post NAR lawsuit settlement in 2022, this is an open negotiation. Once both parties sign, everything's locked in and a deal is struck, and the clock starts ticking for everyone to perform. The first step after contract acceptance is due diligence. This is where the buyers have a time window to verify the home and the condition of the home. As the seller, you are required to disclose anything you know that you've repaired on the home or known defects. In Utah, there's a 16-page document called the seller's disclosure form where you check line by line yes or no and give details about anything you know. Do not skip or gloss over this form. It's incredibly important because it officially releases you from liability when you disclose defects or things that you have repaired. During this time, the buyer has some skin in the game through the earnest money deposit. But here's the catch. Unless otherwise stated, the earnest money is typically refundable to the buyers during this time period. Meaning if they find something they want fixed and you're unwilling to work with them, they can back out and cancel the contract. And that's usually their leverage. However, some buyers may put in the initial offer, hey, we want the house really bad, so we're willing to make our earnest money non-refundable, which kind of locks them into the contract because if they back out, they lose whatever that deposit is. So sometimes this is why an offer with non-refundable earnest money might be a better offer than a higher offer on the purchase price. The third step in this is the financing, appraisal, and title work. Most buyers are probably going to have a mortgage, and so the bank will want to underwrite both the borrower on the mortgage and the home to make sure it's worth what they're borrowing for it. That's the appraisal process. Now, if the home appraises low, the bank will not loan over what their appraised value is. And so if you want to get more than that appraised value, the buyer has to come out of pocket with that in cash. And so if your contract price, you and the buyer have agreed to sell the home for, let's say, 500,000, but the appraisal comes in at 450,000, either the buyer has to come up with the $50,000 difference or you have to lower the purchase price. Now, the financing and appraisal deadline is important because if the buyer decides, hey, we don't want to pay above the appraised value, they can technically back out and keep the earnest money unless otherwise stated in the contract. So if they have hard earnest money, you do have a little bit more leverage to try and get them to perform on the contract or renegotiate. Once the underwriting for the mortgage and the appraisal is done, the bank issues a clear to close. They send out settlement statements to the title companies where you'll eventually go sign papers. They handle all the funds, record the deeds, and transfer the fund to the sellers and agents. Now, for seniors, this entire process requires usually a couple extra layers of planning. If you're getting a massive lump sum from the home equity deposited into your account somewhere, it's not always just a financial win. It can instantly impact your taxes, your Medicare premiums, and even temporarily affect your Medicaid eligibility, which may affect your access to healthcare. There's a lot more moving pieces to the puzzle when you're a senior, especially if you're going to a retirement home or you have a lot of healthcare needs involved that you need to consider. So, understanding the foundation of how the transaction works, the most crucial pieces are the earnest money deadlines, knowing when your earnest money is or isn't refundable to the buyer, your disclosure liability, and post-closing planning. Moving on to marketing your home, the most important piece of this puzzle is your online traffic. Buyers don't look at newspaper ads anymore. They're not going to brick and mortar shops local brokerages, they're going straight to the MLS or Zillow or other sites that list homes. Most buyers set hard online filters to filter what they're looking for by their price point and their must-haves like how many bedrooms or lot size, etc. And so the one piece of that that you have control over is the price point that you choose to list at, as well as the photos you put online. If you price your home too high, you may not even get people that are willing to offer above asking looking at it because it's not showing up in your filter list. Now, too many sellers are relying just on the Zillow Zestimate or other home site estimates to pick their price point. And while those tools are okay for a ballpark and they can give a good idea of the general overall market, they're routinely off by tens of thousands of dollars or more because the algorithm doesn't really know your home, the upgrades, and how well you've cared for it. To get an accurate price, you really have a couple of options. If you want to list your home yourself and avoid having a listing agent, I would highly recommend hiring an appraisal just straight from an appraiser. They'll charge anywhere from $400 to $1,500 to do it, depending on how in depth or what they charge. But they're somebody with access to real comps and data. And then if you get a different appraiser that estimates it low on the mortgage, you have an actual appraisal you can challenge it. Now, outside of pricing, photos are incredibly important. Even if you have the newest phone with the newest camera, it's not going to look as good as what a professional real estate photographer will do. You can hire a real estate photographer from anywhere from $150 to $500 depending on the size of your home and how much footage you want. This is one of the highest ROI marketing moves you can do is get professional photos done. It will attract a lot more attention to your home, get you more showings, and maybe even be the difference between getting you a higher offer. The worst thing that you can do is overprice your home and let it sit there too long. Now, if you have a home that is a little bit dated, even if it's in great condition, one thing that I would highly recommend you do as a seller is get some bids on what it would cost to repaint or refloor or update cosmetic changes, and then factor that into your price point. If you can find a comp nearby that's brand new or fully updated, subtract the estimates you got and maybe price close to that or just above that. Now, the other piece of marketing your home is the actual showings. It's really important to keep your home clean. If you can, show it vacant. That's a much better approach so that every buyer that comes in can envision what the home would look like with them living in it with their stuff. But I know that's not always an option. There's one thing you have to understand is if you're listing yourself, you're going to be responsible for scheduling buyers to come in and look at the home and maybe even showing them the home yourself. You have to understand how a buyer's agent works in 2026 because the commissions have changed. And so what happens is if a buyer has an agent representing them, they've signed an agreement that says they will pay their agent a fee for representing them. And a lot of buyers don't have that money to actually pay the agent. And so they're hoping that when they find a home they like, the agent can negotiate their fee into the offer to satisfy the buyer's responsibility to pay the agent. So even if you list the home yourself and you don't hire an agent to represent you, you may get offers from people that want to buy your home that have to pay their agent, but they can't. And so they're they're only able to offer on the home if you're willing to pay the agent. That section 4E of the Utah real estate purchase contract, you can absolutely negotiate that commission down with the agent, but you have to understand that they also have to match that lower rate with their buyer. As a seller, you can absolutely save on not hiring a listing agent to list your home. However, if you refuse to pay a buyer's agent, then there's a lot of buyers that aren't going to be able to buy your home because they've signed with an agent and they can't afford to pay the agent. Now, I will say one of the values real estate agents do bring to sellers, specifically outside of having access to the MLS and giving a better price point and helping you avoid liability and ensuring a smoother transaction is the scheduling software itself. Agents typically will have a super box which logs everybody who enters that home. The only licensed realtors or other professionals like photographers and inspectors can access those. And it creates a log so they can see who's coming in and out of your home. As well, they can link that to their scheduling software. So if somebody wants to look at the home, they can text you for approval and you can approve or deny it, as well as automate feedback surveys. So there is some value. There is quite a bit of value that a listing agent will add if they're able to offer all of those services and also explain to you how the commissions work very clearly. So, main pieces here are if you're listing yourself or with an agent, the two most important things are the price point and the photos, and then understanding how to negotiate the commissions because it's not advertised on the MLS or anywhere else. It's individually negotiated on each contract. If you want to negotiate like a pro, you need to understand leverage. And in a real estate deal, there's two levers we're talking about. The first one is money, the second one is time. Most sellers are wanting two things: to sell the home at the highest price they can and sell it as quickly as possible. The challenge is that those goals sometimes are competing with each other. A higher priced offer may come with more risk, while a lower price offer may offer better certainty that they're going to close on time or close quickly. So let's start with money. The biggest factor affecting how much you can sell your home for is the appraisal. Appraisals are run blind and independently by a mortgage company. So they hire a third party to come in, appraise the home, and it is what it is. You can challenge appraisals by getting a second opinion, but there's no guarantee that that's going to be better for you. So, if a home appraises lower than the contract price, the buyer may need to bring that additional difference in cash to closing or renegotiate the price, or in some cases, walk away from the deal completely. On the other hand, if your home sells significantly below what it's appraised for, you may be leaving a lot of money on the table. So, in a balanced market, most homes are going to sell relatively close to that appraised value. However, in highly competitive markets, buyers may be willing to pay above the appraised value, while in slower markets, sellers may need to be more flexible. The second major source of leverage in your negotiations is time. Every Utah, every real estate contract contains deadlines. Buyers have their due diligence deadlines, their financing and appraisal contingencies. Sellers, you will, as sellers, you'll have your as sellers, you'll have your deadlines for disclosures and other contractual obligations. And these deadlines matter because they determines who has leverage at different points in the transaction. So, for example, during the buyer during the buyer's due diligence, their earnest money is fully refundable and they can essentially walk away from the deal free and clear. But after that deadline, their ability to cancel the contract and walk away is more limited. At the same time, if the settlement deadline comes and the buyer is not ready to close and can't perform on the contract, you as the seller may be allowed to cancel the contract, keep the earnest money, and move on to a backup offer if you have one, or go back on market. And this is why preparation during that transaction period is really important. Sellers who have marketed their home well will oftentimes have a backup offer in place in case their current offer falls through. As well, if you have a backup offer in place, you may be less willing to negotiate on certain due diligence requests. So, understanding the timing is critical because there's really two rounds of contract negotiation you're going to go through. And the first one is when you're evaluating offers. So hopefully you get multiple offers, or if you're in a slow market, you still need to know how to evaluate whether this is a good offer or whether you should stay on market. The top thing everybody's going to look at is the purchase price, but you should really pay attention to the earnest money that they're asking for, how much they're asking for in seller concessions, if they're asking you to pay an agent fee, how much that is, what personal items that they want included with the transaction, and their financing terms. If they have a larger down payment or if they're able to close quicker, that can indicate that they may be a more qualified buyer. And if they're getting a mortgage, I would absolutely call the lender and make sure that you make sure that that lender sends in a pre-approval that vets that, hey, they are approved to buy this home at this price. A good rule of thumb here though is to assume that the initial contract price assumes that the home is generally safe, functional, and in the condition the buyer would expect. Because in round two of due diligence negotiations, this is where the buyer can ask for certain repairs. But it's really important to understand what's reasonable and what's not. So, anything that is safety or functional items are typically reasonable requests a buyer should ask for. Things like active leaks, plumbing problems, electrical concerns that aren't up to code, structural defects, things like that may come into play. It's probably not reasonable though on due diligence to come in and ask for a flooring allowance or things that were obvious during the initial showing and contract negotiation. Now, buyers can always ask for repairs or credits, but you as the seller can communicate in the initial contract negotiations your expectations for due diligence and what you may be willing or not willing to negotiate on. You can also sell the home as is, meaning you have no intention of making any repairs, and communicate that up front. Clear communication here is the key to having a smooth transaction, though. So, the best negotiators are not always the most aggressive, it's the ones who understand the leverage, know what their priorities are, and are focused on reaching the agreement that accomplishes their goals. Now, this video was supposed to be a high level overview of some of the most important things you need to know if you're going to try and sell your home yourself, or at least get a basic understanding of how the transaction works. So, when you're interviewing agents to sell your home, you can work with the right agent. If you're in Utah and looking for a really smooth transaction to sell your home, I'd love to book a consult to hopefully win you over or go over your specific case and give you some strategy. Feel free to book with me at the link in my bio and check out our next video where we're going to go over what repairs you should do before you sell your home.